The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 45. Secret Torrid Affairs. When Hermione arrived at the potions lab Thursday morning, she was pleased to see 3 pigeons squawking in a cage beside the door. Slytherins truly were resourceful, although it seemed like Pansy had gone out of her way to procure the dirtiest, scruffiest birds possible. Hermione brought the cage into the lab and placed it on the wooden cabinet Draco had repaired. She'd work with them later in the day. Draco was at the Slytherin table when she entered the great hall for breakfast, and they did their usual routine. He'd give her a look, and she'd give him a nod, this time with a small smile. Theo appeared absorbed in his textbook at the other end of the table, flanked by Goyle and a skinny Slytherin boy. Hermione was happy not to have potions that day. She left breakfast early, hoping for some quiet time to study for Friday's Transfiguration exam, and had nearly reached the great hall doors when 2 squeaky mice blocked her way. "I'm busy, Percival," she said, resisting the temptation to pull her bag over her chest.
"Have you forgiven him, Miss Granger?" he said. "Mr. Malfoy, I mean. I have a bet going on."
"Forgiven him what?" Hermione asked.
"For being himself,"
said the red-haired girl, Imogen. Hermione smiled. "I don't know. That's a lot to forgive."
"He is very handsome,"
Imogen said. Percival scoffed.
"You're just jealous,"
she told him. They began arguing, and Hermione took the opportunity to slip away. She was leaning against the wall outside Ancient Ruins, reviewing the limitations of the Inanimator's Conjurer's spell, when footsteps prompted her to look up. Draco was striding toward her briskly, his face unreadable, black robe flapping. He walked straight up to her, and for a mad instant she thought he was going to shake her hand. He looked that businesslike, but instead he placed a hand on the wall beside her head and brushed her lips with his. Hermione couldn't help responding to that light, now familiar touch. It was stupid to do this here, in the hallway where they'd argued so many times before, where McGonagall and her flock could turn up any minute. She needed to stop this, and she would, in just a minute. It was Draco who pulled back. He looked down at her, one hand still on the wall. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Sleep well?" "Very well," she said, trying not to blush. "Thank you for the snitch. I'm using it in my arithmetic presentation today." "Of course you'd find some swotty purpose for it." He looked around the empty corridor, then fixed her with those eyes again. "Meet me tonight, in the old charms classroom." Hermione raised her eyebrow. "It depends. Are you bringing the Codex Runica?" "Are you bringing your loon plan?" "It's loop, and certainly not," she said. "Some people manage to start up secret Torrid affairs without a blueprint." Draco brushed a thumb over Hermione's lower lip, and her breath hitched. "You think I need any help?" he whispered in her ear. His thumb left her mouth and traced lightly down her throat. He was barely touching her, and her heart was pounding. "A secret Torrid affair," he repeated thoughtfully. "Certainly an affair. Hopefully not secret for long." His thumb was tracing her cheekbone now. "How torrid it becomes is entirely up to you." The echo of feet further down the corridor warned them of McGonagall's arrival, and the Slytherin stepped smoothly aside. Hermione felt heated and dishevelled, but Draco was all cool perfection, standing a proper distance away with a superior look. So this was how this was going to be. She could weep for her own stupidity. The rest of Hermione's morning went without incident. The Jupiter-centric model was very well received. Other people seemed to be more interested in the ornate snitch representing Jupiter than the movements of the paperweights circling it. She had prepared answers for 27 likely questions about the presentation, and only 2 were asked, both by Professor Vector. Everyone else just wanted to hold the damn snitch. He should have used a flipping ping-pong ball. Theo ate little at lunch, sitting hunched over slightly with a furrowed brow. Hermione couldn't help being concerned. Perhaps she should approach Blaise, or ask Ginny to ask Blaise about Theo. She sighed and took a bite of her bacon sandwich, or she supposed she could just bud out. Sitting next to Draco in advanced data was excruciating, since he insisted on wearing cologne and, well, breathing. Theo was looking right at them, and she couldn't bear hold his eyes. Una was watching them too. Bluebell floated in the centre of the circle of beanbags holding a carved wooden box.
"All of you are familiar with cursed or spellbound objects," she said. "Personal objects infused with magics can be incredibly powerful and dangerous."
Hermione felt Draco shift uneasily beside her.
"Add enough magic to an object and it becomes almost sentient, able to sense its surroundings and delve into the person holding or wearing it."
Now Hermione was shifting, thinking of the black velvet box in the bottom of her trunk.
"Some magical objects respond differently to the different wizards and witches who possess them,"
Bluebell continued. The entire class was silent, avidly listening to every word.
"Some respond to the power of the wearer or user, while others reflect the power of the witch or wizard who created or presented the magical object."
The fairy smiled at the class.
"I know many of you have encountered the most evil of magical objects, Horcruxes,"
she said as if she were speaking of a favorite cotton candy flavor.
"But there are also magical objects of love, of protection, objects so meaningful that to give them to someone is to give them a piece of yourself in the best way."
Hermione blushed under Ginny's meaningful look, and she felt Draco stiffen slightly. Now was not the time to think of. It wasn't. But there were other objects. The fairy giggled.
"Now, Miss Granger, there's no need to raise your hand. Quite unnecessary."
Hermione tried not to glower. Raised hand was a mark of a civilized society. "Professor Bluebell," she began.
"Bluebell, please, dear girl."
"Professor Bluebell," Hermione repeated stubbornly. "Is it possible to remove a harmful spell from an object, even when that spell has been part of the object for hundreds of years?"
"A powerful spell, I assume, dear? Cast by a powerful witch or wizard?"
"Yes," Hermione said.
"Presented by a powerful witch or wizard?"
"Yes."
"A difficult task, then."
The fairy's blue eyes shone.
"Objects passed through generations are often layered with different spells or curses, to the point where it's difficult to know where the magic ends and the object begins. It would be almost impossible to remove the magic without destroying the object."
"What of another spell?" Theo spoke up, sounding interested. "Could another spell be added to the object to counter the original curse or spell?" Hermione couldn't help but look directly at a Slytherin for the first time. The Nords probably had vaults filled with magic objects, just like the Malfoys. Theo's green eyes remained fixed on Bluebell.
"Risky and possibly lethal,"
Bluebell said, a slight crispness in her tone.
"The object is merely a receptacle or conduit for the magic. 2 conflicting spells could tear the object apart."
There was silence as the entire class absorbed this, and Hermione could feel Draco's eyes on her.
"Today we will practice identifying and removing spells from objects. This is extremely advanced magic, so we'll begin with simple items."
Bluebell opened the box, revealing a handful of small crystals.
"Julie is very receptive to curses and spells, which is why it's such a popular choice."
The fairy handed crystals to Luna, Theo, Neville, Parvati, and Draco.
"Each of these crystals is imbued with a simple spell. Harmless, of course. You will divide into pairs, determine the spell on your stone, and attempt to remove it."
He waved a hand at the blackboard and writing appeared.
"These spells might be helpful."
Hermione thought back to Borgins and Bugs, to Borgins' complicated wand-work as he appraised her diamonds. She thought she'd heard him mutter a few. "Hermione," Draco whispered in her ear. "The Gloriana said you wouldn't actually remove." "Of course not," she whispered back, brushing his hand with hers. "I'd hex anyone who tried." Draco nodded, looking relieved, then held out the crystal pebble from Bluebell. The hand came up, slowly, and took the pebble, her fingers brushing over that rough ball. She held the stone up to the light, and it shone palely. "Luxa," she said, tapping it with her wand. It was a simple light refraction spell that should have divided the light into a rainbow of colors. The stone was unchanged. Draco had his own wand out, casting a seeing spell. "Videre." Again, no response. The pair took turns working through all the spells on the blackboard, with no additional words between them. When Bluebell's list failed, they began trying their own spells, but found no clue to explain the stone's glow. "The light comes from inside the stone," Hermione said. "It's not reflected." Malfoy rolled his eyes. "Obviously." "I think it's a simple light placed inside the stone." She pointed her wand at it. "Intermesa," she said, "a breaking spell." A crack appeared, and the stone cleaved in half, releasing the light, which dissipated into the air and left the crystal pieces behind.
"A clever move, dear Miss Granger, but it won't earn you full marks,"
said Bluebell, floating beside them. "Why not?" Hermione said, surprised. "I identified the spell and removed it."
"But you broke the object," Bluebell said. "Do you always break things just to see what's inside, Miss Granger?"
He drifted away, leaving Hermione open-mouthed. A hand slid over hers and tightened. She could feel the edges of the broken quartz pieces scrape her palm. "Well, dear Miss Granger?" Draco whispered in her ear. Her chest suddenly felt tight. "Would you break me to look inside?" Hermione turned to look at him. "Will I have to?" she asked. "No," he said. "Apparatus. Open." He was suddenly aware of their surroundings again. The curious looks from the rest of the group, Theo's icy stare. "We need to stop having these discussions in class," she said, pulling her hand away. Draco just leaned back in his beanbag, legs crossed at the ankles, looking indolently sinful. Bluebell's wind chimes rang softly, signaling the end of class. Hermione immediately marched over to protest today's grade. The fairy was kind, of course, and wonderfully sympathetic, and it wasn't until Hermione had left the classroom and was halfway down the corridor that she realized that Bluebell had never agreed to give her full marks for the crystal exercise. She was stalking towards the first floor, grumbling under her breath when Draco appeared at her side. Startled, Hermione bumped into an open classroom door. "You can't be walking me through the halls," she told him. "We have to be discreet." He glanced around. He snickered. "It's quite fortunate we never conducted an actual secretory affair. You're rubbish at this." "I'm very secretive," Hermione snapped. "Do yell that a little louder." "Fine," she said, keeping her voice low. "When do you want to meet?" "I have to supervise a squeaky mice detention tonight," Draco said. "Your pet Hufflepuff caught them throwing crumpets into the lake, trying to draw out the giant squid." "Ernie Macmillan's title is head boy, not pet Hufflepuff," Hermione said as they descended the stairs. "Well, he's pathetic at his job." "I'd argue that assigning detentions to your pack of delinquents is precisely his job." "Then he should oversee the detentions," Draco insisted. He gave a group of staring Slytherin girls, blocking their path, a sharp look, and they scattered immediately. "Instead, I'm the one inconvenienced." Hermione couldn't help smiling. "That's because the squeaks are on holy toes with everyone else. They're fine with you. Are you saying I should supervise their detention?" Draco sighed. "No, that would defeat the purpose." He lowered his voice. "Can you meet me at 9 o'clock? Hermione nodded. It was perfect, really. He'd have time to work with Pansy's pigeons. "All right, then." Draco swooped in as if to kiss her, but swerved away at the last minute. The action, however, prompted Hermione to lurch backward into a suit of armor, which fell with a crash. "Quite discreet there, Granger," the Slytherin said with a grin as he strolled away. Hermione glowered as she repaired the damage with her wand and entered the library corridor. Obviously, kissing Draco Malfoy only made the man more impossible. Hermione was approaching the potions dungeons, a copy of "So You Want to Weave a Magic Carpet" under her arm, when she caught a faint whiff of something. She entered the dungeon and nearly gagged as she opened the door to the potions lab. The smell of rotting meat steamed from the blood potion, which bubbled gently in its cauldron. Hermione frowned. The potion should be barely simmering, not outright boiling, and there shouldn't be an odor. The solution probably needed more clover blossoms, which had the effect of tempering the brewing process as well as neutralizing the smell. Unfortunately, she and Draco were out of clover blossoms, and the plant didn't exactly bloom widely in November. What to do? The answer came immediately. Never. He might have some clover or know someone who did. Scowling, Hermione trudged up to the Gryffindor Tower. She'd hoped for some good pitching time before dinner, and instead she was solving a potion crisis. Neville wasn't in the common room or his bedroom, so she dug the Marauders map out of her trunk. Oh no. Neville was in the Everett the Evil alcove with Pansy. Hermione was apparently doomed to interrupt every snogging couple in the castle. She stuffed the map into her skirt pocket. "Don't just charge in this time," she reminded herself as she returned to the ground floor. "Respect his privacy." The divination corridor was deserted, and that was a good thing too, because Hermione could hear the murmur of voices before she even approached the faded tapestry. He checked the map again for good measure. Yes, it was Neville and Pansy in there, behind the heavily warded alcove entrance.
"Neville!"
she hissed loudly. "Neville, it's Hermione. I need to talk to you."
"Now, Parkinson."
It was definitely Neville's voice, but Hermione never heard it pitched so low.
"If I didn't know better, I'd say you were trying to corrupt me."
Pansy sniffed.
"What? Corrupt goody-goody Longbottom? I know lost cause when I see it."
"So you are not trying to seduce me, then?"
Neville's voice had turned impossibly huskier.
"You're just very interested in the many uses of belladonna. And you always wear heels and lace tights."
Pansy gasped softly.
"Do tutoring sessions?"
Neville." Hermione didn't think she should be hearing this. Certainly she shouldn't be standing out here in helpless fascination. Neville was her friend. "Neville, it's Hermione. I'm sorry to interrupt, but—"
"And you always hold tutoring sessions in secluded alcoves?"
Pansy said breathily.
"My belladonna doesn't like sunlight. It's very dangerous, you know."
A rich laugh from Pansy.
"Dangerous? It doesn't look like much to me."
"Really?"
Neville drawled out the word in a way that would make Astoria proud.
"It might appear sweet and unassuming, but looks can be deceiving."
"How deceiving?"
Pansy purred.
"You might want to think twice before touching it."
"Neville!" Hermione said loudly. "Neville, you know I'm out here. Stop this nonsense and—"
"What if I want to touch it?"
Pansy asked.
"What if I've been waiting to touch it, but it chooses to rattle its little leaves and try to act all dangerous?"
"Don't be so sure it's an act,"
Neville said, a smiling quality in his tone.
"You might."
Oh, Merlin, this had to stop. Hermione was feeling a little warm now, and this was Neville. "Neville, Pansy, you get out here this instant!" She smacked her hand against the tapestry, and it was solid as a rock, tightly warded.
"Oh, Neville!"
Pansy moaned loudly. Hermione clapped her hands over her ears, but she could still hear Neville say,
"You silenced this alcove, didn't you, Pans?"
"Yes,"
Pansy gasped.
"No!" Hermione shouted. "No, you didn't, you painted idiot!"
While most older students could cast Muffliato on an area or Silentia on a person, the spell for silencing an area was less well known. And apparently, Pansy had cast the spell backward. She and Neville couldn't hear noises in the corridor, but Hermione could hear everything. Hermione pulled out her wand and did in the last place what she should have done in the first place. She cast a Patronus, which slipped immediately through the tapestry.
"Neville and Pansy,"
she heard her utter in tone. "Hermione's in the corridor and can hear every word." Pansy's moans cut off, as if she'd been choked, and there was dead silence. Hermione backed up, her face hot. The ward vanished, and Neville stepped out from behind the tapestry, lipstick streaks in his hair and a spot of more natural colour in each cheek.
"Hermione,"
he cleared his throat.
"Can I help you?"
"Yes," Hermione said. "My blood potion is overheating."
"Is it now?"
Pansy said, stepping out to join Neville. Hermione glared.
"That can happen when you skulk around alcoves,"
Pansy continued. The Slytherin looked entirely proper, her stockings straight and her pink lipstick impeccable. Hermione ignored this. "The potion needs more clover blossoms, Neville. Do you have any idea where I could get some?"
Yes, of course."
Neville tried to smooth his jumper, but only succeeded in smearing the pink paint further.
"Hagrid keeps a few bushel as a treat for the Thestral. They won't be very fresh, though."
"Thank you," Hermione said formally. "That will do nicely." Neville cleared his throat again.
Happy to help."
Hermione turned to go, then turned back again. "And Neville, I advise you to cast a silencing spell next time. Parkinson's rubbish at it."
"I certainly agree,"
Neville said, a roguish glint in his eyes. Now Pansy glared. Hermione found Hagrid in his garden, and he handed over 2 bushels of clover without hesitation. He wanted to show her how well the baby hydras were doing.
"One is growing another head already."
But Hermione backed off, claiming she had no time for a nice visit.
"You can hold 'em if you want,"
Hagrid said.
"They like it when you sing 'em lullabies."
Hermione fled with her bushel baskets at the very idea, running back to the lab to stabilize her potion. The leftover clover stems she fed to the pigeons, who seemed less than enthusiastic, but Hermione had no sympathy. "Better get used to grass and bugs, boys," she told the birds. She left the lab to go to dinner, sitting opposite a faintly embarrassed Neville, then returned there afterwards. The work with the pigeons was slow going, much more difficult than working with a snitch, and required her entire jar of virgin earth. She was going to have to get more from Neville when he wasn't occupied. Hermione finally succeeded in her efforts just before 8 o'clock, feeling quite satisfied as she tossed the horrid birds out the potion lab window. She barely had time to get out of her uniform, now covered in pigeon feathers and droppings, and take a shower. She then dressed carefully, unsure of the secret Torrid affair dress code. Heels were out of the question. They'd be a dead giveaway to anyone who knew her. Instead, she slipped on more sensible shoes and buttoned up a cardigan against the cold November night. Neville wasn't the only belladonna in this castle. Hermione crept down the stairs to the common room at 10 minutes to 9, hoping to keep a low profile. No such luck. 7th and 8th year students filled almost every chair and sofa, cramming for Friday's exams. Desperate pleas followed her all the way to the portrait hall.
"Hermione, can you explain how transfigure wood grain into fish scales?" "Hermione, do you know the 17 uses for powdered bicorn horn?" "Hermione, please." Dean and Seamus blocked her way, looking desperate. "Or you're absolutely lost with this protein charm." He glared at them. "Dean, I just covered that last week. You two need to look at your porn." Now the whole room was staring. All the 8th years rolled their eyes. Hermione growled and opened the portrait hall. All right, maybe she was a little on edge, what with Neville carrying on behind inadequate silencing spells and her housemates being idiots and— "Ah, Hermione," said a pompous voice. Oh, just what she needed right now. Arnie was blocking her way, a clipboard in hand. "I was just coming up to find you. We've settled on an inter-house event for Dumbledore's birthday. Do you have a spare hour? I'd like to review some logistics." Hermione strove for calm. Poor Arnie had spent 30 minutes after dinner stuck to Peeves, both head boy and ghost, the helpless victim of rhapsody. Laghorn couldn't brew unravelly fast enough these days, and the serving potion was so volatile that students were banned from making it. Laghorn had asked Hermione to cook up a few cauldronfuls, but she had shaken her head, trying to look regretful. "I'm terribly sorry, Professor, but it's against the rules," she chirped. Laghorn could do his bloody job for once, and he deserved any amount of grief for introducing Rhapsody to the classroom in the first place. "I'm sorry, Ernie, I've plans," Hermione told him. "What's the event anyway? I hope it's a Dumbledore quiz game. We can create inter-house teams and give out prizes." "Oh, no." Ernie looked uncomfortable. "We're holding an inter-house Quidditch match." "A what?" Hermione couldn't believe it. "That's not educational at all." "Well, that was kind of the point," Ernie said. "People want to have fun." "Quiz games are fun," Hermione insisted. "Yes, I like a bit of trivia myself," Ernie said, which mollified Hermione slightly. "What the prefects, they—" He trailed off, looking helpless. Hermione grunted. "Well, then I guess you're planning a Quidditch match. Who are the captains?" "Madame Hooch volunteered, and Slughorn promised us to keep her from the Holyhead Harpies," Ernie said, brightening. "We'll have 2 teams made up of a mix of houses. Ginny and Draco Malfoy will be the Seekers, and the Keepers will be Ravenclaw's Arthur Fleet, and Slytherin's Astoria Greengrass." "Interesting," Hermione said, and it was. "What about Hufflepuff?" Ernie looked dejected. "Our team is pathetic this year. Billy Froome hasn't caught the snitch once this season." "Well, this is fascinating, really," Hermione said, edging away. "But I must—" "Can you just spare 10 minutes?" Ernie begged. "I've reserved the pitch, but I don't know what to do but jerseys. Should we let players wear their house colours and maybe add rosettes or sashes, or use all new colours like cream and purple? And McGonagall's agreed to make a little speech. Should I ask her?" Hermione relented and spent 10 minutes in a 3rd-floor classroom with Annie going over colours and banner placements. She sternly vetoed the prefect's suggestion that all the players dress like Dumbledore, complete with hats and beards. Annie looked quite satisfied as they stepped back out into the corridor. "Thank you, Hermione," he said, beaming. "I knew a little quiet time alone with you would sort everything out." "Oh, you were in there with Ernie?"
Luna was standing near the door, holding a curvy pole with a silver net hanging from a heart-shaped frame.
That must be what attracted the love diggers. I was hoping to catch a few. Could you stand nearer each other?
Lovely, Hermione began, while Ernie flushed.
That was very kind of you, Hermione,
Luna said.
Ernie's been quite tense lately. I hope you enjoyed yourselves.
I did not enjoy myself with Ernie, Hermione snapped. Ernie looked hurt. I mean, of course I did, but not... She stammered on as passing students stared and began whispering. She distinctly heard the word pawn. Hermione huffed in frustration. Now, on top of being a violent, incompetent lunatic, she was apparently a sex fiend. Not that she wasn't trying. She didn't know why she was worried about an open relationship with Draco. It seemed almost tame in comparison. Ernie's deep blush made everything worse. They had finally gotten over the whole storage room debacle, and now this. Hermione gave Luna a ferocious glare, then turned to Ernie. Ernie, she said loudly, I was very glad to help you with the logistics for Dumbledore's birthday. You'll do a fine job of organizing the inter-house unity event. With a final glare for Luna, she stalked off towards the secret staircase to the fourth-floor corridor, checking her watch. 9:17. This was ridiculous. For years Hermione believed that she never had a secret Torrid affair at Hogwarts because she wasn't attractive enough. Now, the reason was clear. She'd never had the time. To be continued. Next up, back in the Charms classroom. Hopefully, things will go better this time. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.